That means I can go to the movies, see a horror film, and I can sue somebody.
Oh, well, good afternoon and welcome to AM News Network presents Summary Judgment, our weekly 2-hour show. I'm Rachel Baird. I'm joined by Ed Peruta and Matt Tyszkka. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please join us.
See everyone.
Ed and I are here on Monday through Thursday mornings from 7 to 7:30. So we have a lot to talk about today. A lot is going on. Perhaps we should start with some short introductions. Matt, why don't you go first?
Okay, Matt Tyszkka, retired Lieutenant Colonel from Connecticut State Police, attorney, and member of various pro-gun organizations.
Connecticut Carry.
Connecticut Carry, legislative liaison.
Yep, Connecticut
nothing
citizen.
new to report on that front so far. Of course, NRA, Oath Keepers, and several others.
We were just talking about the gun buyback that was scheduled in Hartford this week and whether, or today, and what the results were of that, and we'll be sure to check into that.
I think it went from, what, 10 to 3?
It's not a buyback.
Or something.
I'm sorry,
Well,
that's
yeah,
what
gun
they call
surrender.
it.
Yeah,
That's
this is
they
what
call
they
it.
call it, yeah, their terminology, and, you know, we still maintain that it's illegal. You know, and they're advertising that you can get, what, I think it was $450 snap card or something for an assault weapon. Well, if you walk in with what they call an assault weapon, and you give it to them, and there's no questions asked, I wonder if there'd be any problem if you walked in with your face hooded, just to make sure they weren't recording you, gave them, you know, an AK-47, let's say, and I guess they just give you the $450 and say sayonara, and you say thank you, bonjour, and you're out.
So the $450 is just for assault weapons, or is that for any gun?
Yeah, it's $450. I think it's what?
They give $10 for a slingshot.
Do they? Yeah, probably. Well, it's like $100 for a pistol and $50 for a shotgun or rifle. They have it in tiers.
Okay.
They give you so much.
Well, let's start off by doing something.
Yeah, let's do something.
Right.
I agree.
Matt Tyszkka does a lot of work in between shows. He does a lot of research. He submits a lot of stuff to Rachel and I, some of which never ends up on the show, which it should. But he brought something today that I think is very interesting. It's a map.
Yep.
And it is a map, a murder map. And I believe that Master Control can bring it up on Computer One. This is the murder map. Now, Matt, we can post that up on Facebook, correct?
We should be able to, yeah.
Right.
I didn't do it yet.
You really can't see the state of Connecticut. But the darker the red, the more homicides or murders. And if you get a chance to look at this on your computer and you look at the state of Connecticut, there are 3 counties in red, real red. Hartford County, that has the city of Hartford. New Haven County, that has the city of New Haven. And Fairfield County, which, don't be deceived, has the city of Bridgeport. And the surrounding communities, the hood. And I believe you'll probably find that if you look at the list of Project Longevity, and I haven't gotten a response back for the Project Longevity FOI. I want to know how much money's going into it. But I believe that this map should be a topic that Matt should be able to discuss on the show and educate the people on the other side of the camera as to what it means.
Yeah. This map is from the Crime Prevention Research Council, which is John Lott, Dr. John Lott. Of course, he did the research on this and made it into a graphic. And the red areas, the dark red areas you see on the screen, represent the highest murder rates, which are mostly guns, in the United States. And if you go online to the CPRC website, you can probably see, you can click on those areas and it'll enlarge them. You know, we didn't do it here. But it's very obvious.
Well, he was able to enlarge the graphic
Right,
so
so you can
that
see
you can
Connecticut.
see
area.
Connecticut. I
Right.
don't know if you get the move. There it is.
Yeah, and you can see in Connecticut, if you know where Connecticut is on the map there, you can see there's a like a reverse L shape right there. He's
Boy,
Dan's
Long
putting the
Island's
cursor
got some
around.
shit going, huh?
Oh yeah,
You
well
know?
they've got all the gangs. They've got the
M13 or whatever it is.
MS-13 down there,
MS-13.
and the Russians.
Well, that's where the
everybody
Bob buries everybody. Then you got
Yeah.
Boston.
They're
I'm
in New
just
Jersey.
saying that, we're in the northwest corner right
Right.
now.
Does
and it's
Chicago have its very own color? I would think.
Yes, it's right there at the bottom of the lake.
Yeah, I would think that it would be beyond
Yep.
red.
Well, there, it should be like black.
And
Yeah.
it almost looks like there's a red along the New Jersey Turnpike border. The New Jersey Turnpike.
How does Baltimore
Yeah,
look?
it goes down there, and then you can see on the right, just below Long Island there, the dark red area. That's basically
New Jersey.
Yeah, that's southern New Jersey, and then there's Washington D.C. right in that area.
Gun-free zone.
Yeah. Oh, completely gun-free.
Wow.
See, all of these reds are gun-free zones essentially,
Yeah.
and some of them are actually sanctuary cities as well.
Wow. So, we've seen the map. There's Miami, Dade County,
Yeah. Oh
Broward
yeah.
County.
Yeah. There you go, southern Florida.
Yep.
Wow.
But the basic study says the worst 1% of counties have 19% of the population and 37% of the murders. Okay, 1% of the counties have 37% of the murders. The worst 5% of the counties contain 47% of the population, and they account for 68% of the murders. So it's 5%
Say
of
that
the
one more time.
The worst 5% of the counties account for 68% of the murders. And over half the murders occur in only 2% of counties. And the most murder-intensive counties are also those with the strictest gun laws, like Southern California and Chicago, just as two examples. So, the U.S., they say, is #1 per capita gun ownership, but we're number 103 in the world in violent crime. So if you take that map and you take out those, just a few of those dark red urban areas where the most violence comes in, is committed, the United States would be probably 200th or something, or 300th as far as violence in the world. Because those, like they've compared in the past Chicago to exceeding the murder rate in Iraq, where we have a war going. So people can use that map as a reference to put things into perspective and say it's not like the United States. The anti-gunners say the United States is #1 in the world for gun violence because we have the most gun ownership. No, we have the most gun ownership. That's true, but we also have a very low homicide rate, and that the homicides that do get committed in bulk are in the urban areas, high urban areas with strict gun control. And some of them are sanctuary cities too. So take that and chew on it.
Well, I just when I got the email asking if we could put the graphic up today. I downloaded it, I looked at it, and I said, this is something to look at.
Well, there's always the danger in mistaking cause and effect. There's so many variables at play that to say strict gun control laws and most murders occur in the same urban areas. Is one related to the other? Does one affect the other? I guess the only way you'd ever know, I mean, there may be ways to know, but the only way you might ever know is to take away the strict gun control laws in urban areas and see if the murder rate changes or not. But then even then, there may be other variables that change in quality or quantity where you could never actually in life know if something changed another way, if it would have been different, because you only have, so many opportunities to test out the different circumstances. Now, if somehow all the violence was spread around the United States, it was the same amount of violence, but it wasn't concentrated in one area. It was evenly dispersed throughout the United States. We'd still be number 103, right? That wouldn't change it because it would still be the same amount.
I believe the numbers are the comparison.
The numbers, the comparison, yeah.
But when you look at the distribution, it kind of tells you something.
Yeah, what does it tell us? It tells us that if you look at things historically, it could tell us this, that if you look at things historically in this country, we had slavery in this country. Our country benefited from slavery for a long time, and there was a civil war which ended slavery, but it still left a group of people, a minority, very identifiable because of their race, in a position that was not equal to the white majority. The South especially was affected by this, and there was a large movement of minority individuals from the South to the North, especially the urban areas in the North, for jobs and to seek a better life, to get out of the South where they felt like they were very discriminated against. And so the movement occurred, in the 50s, 60s, to cities like Hartford and Baltimore and Detroit and you name it, up the East Coast. And in the 60s, there were riots, there was unrest, a lot of the jobs have gone away if you look at these urban areas. And so you're left with a constant, and then there was the white flight. When this happened, the white people left these areas. And the white people were the ones at that time who had the resources and the jobs and everything else, and they left. They went to the suburbs, leaving this group of people who had moved to these areas, who didn't have education equal, who didn't have a lot of the benefits, who let's face it, 2 generations, 3 generations right out of slavery. And so then there was unrest because the cities were overburdened with this influx of people who needed a lot of help and didn't have equal opportunities. And you not only had that, but you had the people who were educated and had resources leave. So it was a double burden that happened. Well, it's not a surprise that 20, 30, 40 years later, the cities are shitholes and violent because people have been denied opportunities. And I think we shouldn't ignore that dynamic that has happened. I think a lot of us would like to ignore it because you read things on Facebook and you say, you know what? I'm not responsible for this stuff. My kid's not responsible. I'm white. I didn't have slaves. Why should I have to suffer for it? Why should I have? Well, because the urban areas are part of this country and they're making us 103rd high up on the list of violent countries. And we do have to do something about it. So is it the stricter gun laws? I'm not sure I can buy that argument. I think it's historically, this country has still not recovered from what occurred in our early history before slavery was abolished. And the effects of that are still being felt, just in a different way. So that's my piece. Well, and I know that's going to be perhaps controversial, but a lot of the facts that I'm arguing can't be denied. I mean, can anybody deny that a lot of black people moved from the South to the North for better opportunities and jobs to the big cities, and as soon as they did that, the white people left the cities? That's hard to deny.
Well, I don't know that that correlates to violence. All that map shows is that in dense population areas, you're going to get a lot of different crime, violent or not, just because of the density of people in the area. You're going to have, like in New York City, you get pickpockets, flim-flam artists. You don't get that probably in small town Nebraska.
Well, so it would be more important to look at the per capita crime rather than the amount of crime then to really get a good picture if it's higher.
You could.
Yeah.
And people have done that.
Right.
My theory, what I'd like to do as an experiment is flood the cities with firearms. Okay, and just see what happens. Because, talking about sociological aspects, there are people that argue that it's obviously don't think it's guns that cause crime, it's culture. It's individual people, there's mental people, whatever, but there's also cultures that may cause crime. So, we don't know that, for sure. So the thing, my point on the whole thing is, if you're going to deal with these cities, sociologists, criminologists have been dealing with this stuff since the early to mid 1800s. They haven't found a solution for it, and neither have we. So my point is don't deprive me of the right to own a firearm and defend myself or use it legally as a solution to the problems of gun violence in the inner cities, or anywhere for that matter, but particularly those areas. Taking my gun away isn't going to help that problem in those dark red areas to any extent.
We are coming at it from different angles, but on that point, we agree exactly. And to go a bit further with that, why are politicians ignoring the real problems in the cities, which I've just described, and blaming things on guns? Has nothing to do with guns. It has to do with, I think, our history and what occurred in the 50s, in the 60s, the economy over time. We lost a lot of industrial jobs. People who don't have certain education, what do they do now? There's only so many McDonald's and Wendy's in an urban area for people to work at. And if they work at them, what kind of opportunities do they have? Crime to me, some people are just born criminals, I guess you could argue, or they're mentally ill or whatever. But a lot of people, crime is about just not giving a shit because you don't feel like you're part of the system. You don't feel like following the rules is going to get you anywhere. And you just have given up. And so you're going to commit crimes because what difference does it make if I'm a felon or not? What difference does it make if I'm in and out of jail? What are my opportunities? What am I going to be sitting behind a corporate desk, at Exxon or IBM or Microsoft or whatever? Am I going to be doing that? Nobody I see is doing that. So it's just not feeling part of the system, and you have to make people conform and make them feel like there's a benefit to them of being part of the system before they follow the rules of the system. If you feel like you're not part of the system, why follow the rules of the system? If you get no benefit from the system, why follow the rules of the system? And there are some people that go through that in little ways in their life and have that feeling at times. Most of us, in fact. But we stay on the straight and narrow, number one, because we don't know any other way. And we're worried about what other people think and what will happen to us if we do something. So we follow the rules. And but there are some people that don't have those concepts just imprinted on them all their life. And so there's not a whole lot of downside to crime for them. So anyway, yeah. So I think we're coming at it from the same way. Why are guns and gun laws even part of the conversation when it comes to cities and why there's urban violence? Guns have nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. It's our history that people don't want to face up to because nobody knows how to solve it, and it is our Achilles heel in this country.
Well, yeah, and what you said is the politicians, they give lip service to solving these problems, but they never do. Guns are easy.
Guns are easy. That's right.
You know, it's an easy issue for them, and you know, they make everything sound good. Well, instead of history, why don't we fast forward to 2017 in Connecticut? Why are there no jobs in Connecticut for people? It's not just minorities, it's everybody, because the Democrat machine in Connecticut, which has been in control for almost all of the last 60 years, has driven business and companies and moms and pops and everything out of the state or out of business altogether. When you have no jobs, you have no jobs. They talk about hiring. Well, if you don't have a company or a job, you know, job market, you can't hire people. So they're trying to come at it saying, well, we'll offer incentives to UConn graduates if they stay in Connecticut for their profession or whatever they do. That's not the solution. You can train, say, I don't know, a sales marketing manager, a student, pay him to stay in Connecticut. Well, that's good. He or she can stay in Connecticut, but where do you go for a job in that field? If stores are going out, you know, Sears is going out, so they can't manage Sears. GE left, you can't put them in management in GE, and so there's a lot of problems along what you're saying, but it's contemporary, not just historical.
Ed,
Period.
I know he's probably over there fuming with some ideas.
Oh yeah, right.
No, I'm rather impressed. I actually heard you say that the city's turned into a shithole, and to hear that word "shit" come out of your mouth, you know, impressed me. And then you talked about people who don't give a shit, and that's twice in one show that I heard that you say that. But you know, I'm sitting here kind of keeping my mouth shut because what I would say would probably piss a lot of people off. And I know that there's people that would probably want to hear me say it, but I do have comments, and I'm going to try and keep them tame. Because I go back now 20 years, 26 years, to 1991, when I was on public access and there were issues. And I said at the time that, and I'm going to get into this, affirmative action should have a sunset date in the future, 12 years, 20 years, have a sunset date in the future. And tell everybody who needs to have that program or that philosophy to give them the step up, take it or leave it. But in 20 years, it is gone.
20 years isn't even a generation, or it is one generation.
Okay. Then let me now you talk. Now let me talk.
Okay.
And you can have your little one-liners every once in a while to try and guide me through this. Okay?
You write 'em down
If
so
I
you
was
forget.
to
No, so I don't
ask,
forget.
if I was to ask the people who are down and out, or the professors or the experts in solving government or society's problems, okay, make a list. Tell me how much. Tell me what. Tell me for how long. And I'm going to give it to you. Is it going to be a 5-year program? Is it going to be a 10-year program? Is it going to be a 20-year program? Is it going to be a 100-year program? Okay. When we get to that date, you don't have the results, it's done. And I'll give you the example that I use to tell people about it. In 1949, the British agreed to give up Hong Kong in 50 years. The Chinese agreed to let Great Britain have Hong Kong for 50 years. And then all of a sudden it started creeping up to 1999. And everybody realized that the British were going to have to hand their territories, their colony, their whatever, over to the Chinese. Because the Chinese look at 50 years as a blip in time.
When it comes to things like that.
Great Britain saw 50 years as, we don't need any more than that. Now, I said 25 years ago, there's people in the inner city that are in gangs and they're selling drugs. They can make $100, $200, $300 a night selling crack and heroin and regular cocaine. People working at Pratt & Whitney aren't making that kind of money. Call comes in. Yeah, but they could get killed. Right. They're making a decision to be able to live with money for 5 good years rather than having 40 bad years. That's the way they are making their money.
It's choices.
These gangs, they don't run in a financial vacuum. They're making money. They're making big money.
They have to.
And that money's getting kicked around and distributed. Now, what are we going to do? How do we change that map?
And there's a history of immigrants and gangs. I've watched the specials on Biography about the Irish gangs.
Well, there were gangs since the country was formed.
Right. We have a phone call here.
Oh, somebody's calling.
But I think the difference is, for example, with Irish gangs or Italian gangs, which I guess is the mafia, people were able to assimilate out of the gangs and become part of the establishment to a greater extent because they were not as identifiable as other minorities. In other words, if you are white, it is easier to assimilate and become part of the workforce, education, intermarry, than it is in this country where, intermarriage among the races was illegal at one point. And it still doesn't occur that much, where that's the difference. A lot of people like to compare, the ascent of the Irish, Italians, a lot of other immigrants, but it's different when you are identifiable by your race. It's human nature where, the things that look alike go together. We do that with a lot of things. And that explains, to a certain extent, why our cities remain predominantly minority now. So the whole gang thing that you're talking about, it doesn't seem to be going away because people are not assimilating the way other immigrants have assimilated after being part of criminal enterprises, which they found at the time was a more not productive, but a way to make more money because they didn't have opportunities in the regular job force. But the opportunities in the regular job force, I don't think, have come as fast for people in the cities as they did at one time.
Well, everything comes down to decisions. Everyone does things that they think are in their best interests.
Right.
So there's something in their best interests that they perceive, may or may not be true, but they perceive that living in Hartford, New Haven, or Bridgeport, or Chicago or New York has some advantage to it that they want to go there and do whatever. Okay, there's something to attract them.
Phone call?
Yep.
Paul Reese on line 1.
Paul Reese. Loyal viewer, Paul Reese. Looking forward to this. Oh. Hi, Paul. It's Summary Judgment. This is Rachel. How are you?
I know this is Rachel. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm here with Matt and Ed.
Hi, Paul.
Yes.
We'll get her mugshot on for you.
Now, I imagine you might have some comments about what we've been discussing.
Oh, of course. That's why I called in. But I've been working, and I just hooked up some electrical new service over in Rocky Hill for somebody tomorrow. Tomorrow I got to cut the grass at the Portuguese Club, and then Monday I got to do a roof somewhere. I don't know where.
Oh, I hope it's not too hot for you. What do you have to say about what we've been discussing? I'm interested.
I saw a little bit of it. I'm trying to catch up and get it on my YouTube, and my computer is like lagging. So
okay.
But I heard the beginning. You could tell me as right now. You could tell me what's going on. Then I'll see you later. But I caught some of it. About Hartford and the money and the drugs and everything. Oh yeah, I know all about it.
Wide camera, please.
Well, why don't you catch up a little bit on it and then call us back later in the show, okay? Because it's hard for me to go back and repeat what.
You're right. I will. I'm going to find all my computers and TVs running right, and then I'll call back. Okay.
Yeah, we'll be here till 6.
Okay, continue. I'll call back.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Talk
Bye.
later.
Always nice
You're
hearing
welcome.
from callers. I know. So what do you do now when you press that? Is that what you do?
I believe you do.
Okay, we'll get it right one day.
Um,
But you go ahead. I interrupted you.
Okay. I am fortunate, I guess, to have been born into the family I was born into, of the color of my skin that I have, everything about it. But, I'm 68 years old, and if I want good Polish food, I go to a Polish area of New Britain.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Yes.
They've got some awesome Polish food.
And
Well,
I
it's-
think
the
the name of the restaurant we like is Staropolska.
Staropolska.
Is that it?
It's
You've been
Old
there?
Poland.
It's
Yep.
very good.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so
Very
you can go there, and there's Polish-style markets that carry imported food from Poland, and there's a large Polish community in New Britain. Has as long as I can remember. They came over to work in the factories.
Mm-hmm.
The south end of Hartford was historically Italian.
Mm-hmm.
The north end was first, I guess, Jewish, and then it
Jewish up there.
went to black. The west end and Park Street was French, Portuguese, whatever. Providence, Rhode Island, has a very large Italian community. The south side of Boston. People tended to band together.
Well, yeah. There was chain migration.
Common interests, common religion, common food, common type of skills. And I understand the group mentality. But some people choose to break out and hit the Oregon Trail and end up on the West Coast. They leave the comfort of the Lower East Side of New York and do whatever they have to do to get to the West Coast. People that left the South did whatever they had to do to get to the jobs in the factories in the North. Not for my grandfather's generation, who came from Eastern Poland. He worked in a junkyard, but he was good with his hands, a carpenter. He did our haircuts as kids, but spoke broken English, but it wasn't really him who enjoyed or succeeded immensely in the United States. But you come down and look at his children and what they did. Then you come down and look at their children and look at what they did. And you go back to that person who got on a boat in Hamburg, Germany to go to a place they've never been and to try to survive. Now, somehow, some way, those urban areas have to be broken up, or they have to be dispersed somehow, because it's going downhill. Hartford is now junk bond rated.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Moody's, Standard & Poor, whoever it was, has just lowered them 2 notches to junk bond status. The city of Hartford has, I guess, hired bankruptcy attorneys to Mayor begging Bronin,
Restructure.
is late to the table for hiring these lawyers. In other words, when he was going around begging from the suburbs, he should have been having those lawyers to deal with the problem that's going to happen. There was an article in the mainstream media that said that Hartford is going to take the brunt of the state's fiscal crisis. There's nothing that Malloy can do for Bronin.
Right.
It's not there.
Not anymore.
And it wasn't there. And to come up with a budget anticipating that it was only shows how naive Mayor Bronin really is with his Oxford education.
What were his options, though?
Bankruptcy.
That's about it at that point. Now, granted, he wasn't there that built this problem. He did inherit it, but he hasn't changed it. These people, like Bronin or Malloy or whatever, they see we've got to tax more to get us out of this problem. It's the if-only syndrome. If only we could have more money. If only we could get more revenue. If only we could increase taxes. They never say if only we could cut, or if only we could change the entire system, because the whole problem is systemic. If you give a drunk $1,000 and say, here, get well, do what you can, clean up and everything, that $1,000 lasts a day, a week, whatever. It doesn't solve the problem.
And on the way to
nothing
solving the
changes.
problem, he goes into the package store.
Yeah.
No.
It doesn't change.
Let me
Doesn't change
just
anything.
tell you, because I live with this. I live in a pretty nice town, Rocky Hill, Connecticut.
Yeah, it's great.
It's got its issues, but it's a pretty nice town. The headquarters for Ames department stores was located in Rocky Hill, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Their headquarters building has been vacant for about 25 years.
That long?
And it just sits there.
It sits there.
It looks terrible.
Wow.
It just sits there.
How is that? Who owns it? Do they pay taxes?
Well,
How does
I mean,
that happen?
Well, bet you
I
there's
don't
big
know.
tax
Well,
lien
they
on
went
that
through
one.
bankruptcy. I think that somebody bought it, then somebody sold it, and then somebody sold it again, and somebody may have bought it. But
Wow.
the economic development officer for Rock Hill tries to lure people in to occupy, to purchase, to inhabit, to use the space. Well, at one point in time, the building was pretty good, and the parking lot was pretty good.
Oh, you have to rip it down now.
Jesus Christ, I'm willing to
been
bet you they
neglected.
got trees growing out of the pavement now.
Or the carpet's inside.
They've got trees growing out of the pavement now. If nothing else, somebody should say, if you are starting a business and you need space to put your business. You pay a little bit of tax, you pay the utilities, and you pay a maintenance fee, and you're in the door. You know, it's like they're doing this in Hartford, I know. They've got these places where entrepreneurs can go in and start a business. Well, that fucking Ames department store has been sitting vacant for, I gotta say, at least 25 years.
Yeah.
And it's right up the road from me. I mean, I go by it, I look, I say,
I am so happy when I see abandoned buildings being torn down.
leveled.
Yeah, because that's what needs to be done. These buildings that sit vacant for decades. For example, in the West Farms Mall area in West Hartford, Sears went out of business, and they are ripping it down, and they should, because that building looks terrible. It looked terrible when Sears was in operation. It's outdated, and it just needs to come down.
Yeah, they're totally gutting it.
They are. They're going to put in new things there. But you know what? That's an area that is economically viable, where the hotshot new businesses want to come in. I mean, you have Trader Joe's over there and all those kind of things. So that's an easy solution for West Hartford. But it's these areas like you're talking about in Rocky Hill, although they did get that huge new apartment complex over there, but it's right near Route 91. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and the state's attorney's office is down there.
It is. It's right across the road. Yeah.
So, you know, Rocky Hill's not a bad location.
No.
Well,
it's
let me
just somebody
let me
doesn't want
tell you.
that
You know,
building.
Channel 3 WFSB moved into Rocky Hill,
Oh, they
and
did?
they did. They're up off of Corporate Ridge, right across the street from the state's attorney's office, and back of the Sheridan.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they moved from Broadcast House in downtown Hartford, Constitution Plaza, to Rocky Hill. Now, and they've got a beautiful facility, but you know, I had said for years, as a Spot News videographer, I would hear something on the scanner, and I go, okay, I've got 91 north and south, I've got Route 9, I've got access to Route 2, I've got access to 9 to 84, 691 to Waterbury. I can be in Waterbury in 25 minutes.
Yeah, you got
And
highways
not really
everywhere.
breaking the speed limit. So that if there's an event breaking in Waterbury, I can get there. Rich was a pilot for Lifestar Helicopter, and he used to say to me, how the hell do you beat me in a helicopter to the scene? And I said, well, your pager goes off, you have to run across the street, you have to go up in an elevator, you have to sit in the pilot's seat, you have to run through the checklist, you have to call Brainerd Tower and get clearance, or Bradley Field to get clearance to lift off from Hartford Hospital. I said, and you have to warm up your engines in pre-flight. I said, and that's 20 minutes. And it takes me a minute to run to my car, and my car travels at 60 miles an hour or 1 mile per minute. So in a 20-mile radius of my house, I can get there because I have all of the roads. The only direction I couldn't go was northwest, where now I do a show. And you know, when you try to get here, you're doing back roads. You're doing Route 4. You're doing 202. You're doing 72. You know, you just can't get here. It's
tough.
not easy. Okay, that's fine. But there's people that hibernate up here. You know, there's people that have their homes 300 feet off the road. They don't want anybody around. They want their privacy. And that's fine. But let's go back to the red on the map. The red on the map is why I carry a firearm when I go into the red areas.
And it's why people who live in the red areas, who are law-abiding citizens, should have an equal right to possess a firearm as people in the non-red areas.
If they choose.
Exactly.
If they choose.
If they choose.
Well, that goes for anybody.
You know, I could envision
Okay.
a work program where skills are taught. You know, people are, you know, I mean, with the WPA, Work Projects Administration, you know, under Roosevelt, we have to do something. We have to do something, carpenters, electricians, plumbers.
Because the way it is now, progress has been too slow. Affirmative action, whatever has been put in place to solve the issues that have resulted from our historical situation have not worked.
No.
They failed.
Well, that's by design.
Something else needs to happen.
I think that's by design. The liberals don't want the issues to go away. They want people kept subservient and dependent on them. Their promises get them votes every election, not solving the problem. That's all it is, rhetoric and promises, and everybody goes and votes for the liberal. The problem hasn't been solved in 50 years, but they've been saying the same promises for 50 years without a result. So the voters are pretty stupid, all in all. They've got to smarten up, and I think some of them are starting to wake up and see it's not changing.
Somebody said during the recent presidential campaign, vote for me. Why don't you vote for me and just try it once?
Yeah.
In other words, what do you got to lose? Because you're right, Matt. Election cycle, and I don't say day after day, month after month, or year after year. Election cycle after election cycle, we have heard the same bullshit time and time and time again. And what they do is they spend millions, and I would go as far as, if you look back in time, over $1 billion refining the message that gets the most votes, whether it's true or not.
Yeah, whatever the focus group tickles at.
Whatever. Yeah, right. Right. Now, let's go to Rachel. Did you bring anything? I know there's a huge topic in the wind.
Oh yeah.
That you have been smoked over for at least the last 4 or 5 hours. It started, I think, yesterday or the day before.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how we missed a report, a 68-page report about the June 4th, 2016 Flatbush incident. It's an IA report that is dated February 10th, 2017, but it looks like the Hartford Courant wrote about it in April of 2017, and the headline was 5 officers disciplined for the June 4th, 2016 Flatbush incident. And I started reading it probably around 11 today, and it took me till 1 or 1:30 to get through it. And there was one, and I'm going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I think there's a lot to review here, but there's one interview of a police officer that totally stood out to me, and I posted it on your Facebook page, and that's an interview with Officer Stephen Barone, who coincidentally Ed is suing related to the September 12, 2014 Park Street
first
incident,
contact,
where Barone kept pushing Ed back when Ed was trying to record the crime scene, and we allege that they were just trying to push Ed back because they don't want the media having access to crime scenes because they want to control the narrative. And there are some interesting comments by Officer Barone in his statement to IA, which included Lieutenant Coates and Sergeant O'Brien. And I want to start by going over those, because I don't think you've heard them yet, Ed, and I don't think you've heard them yet, Matt.
Okay.
No.
Before you get into that, 3 things happened this week with me. 1, I had an FOI hearing.
Oh yeah.
Regarding the Hartford Police Department and Chief James Ravella. I attended a Freedom of Information Commission meeting where the executive director of the FOI recommended that my case against Torrington not be heard because of certain reasons. And then I went to an FOI hearing against and with the Hartford Parking Authority, Mr. Boone. I had a hearing officer, Brown, in the first hearing. I had a hearing officer...
Kathleen Ross was in the first hearing.
And Perlman was in the second hearing. And in the middle, there is a paragraph 4 in the recommendation to the FOI that says the gravamen, is that how you say it?
You got
The
it.
gravamen of the complainant's position is that he believes there is a difference between prompt access to inspect a public record and requesting copies of a public record.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been doing FOI for 41 and a half years. I have more time visiting the FOI than anybody that works there. And I started out both of my presentations like this. If there is now, in 2017, no difference between a request for prompt access to inspect a public record and a request to copy a public record, then this hearing is over, I lost, I go home. Because if you rule that way, it is a message to every custodian of a record in the state of Connecticut: fuck prompt access, we'll take as long as we want. Now, in both of my cases, the one against the police and the one against the parking authority, the Corporation Counsel's office is involved. In the case of the police department, I had initially asked to see all photographs of police officers who were present at Park and Kelsey Street. Well, I wasn't granted access because the Corporation Counsel's office told them not to give me access because of security of the officers and they may be undercover. That's their excuse. Then they tried to say that I had a lawsuit going. And then they tried to say that I got what I was looking for from the Corporation Counsel's office. But I was able to say to the hearing officer on Wednesday or Tuesday? Tuesday, I went like this. For the record, this is what I asked for. Today is July 11th, 2017. That was the date of the hearing. I said, to this date, I have not received one photograph under this FOI request, which I made on August 26th, 2016. They, in their response to me, said all the requests that come in are treated equal and they're put into a queue and we take them in the order that they came in. I filed my request on August 26th. It was acknowledged on the 26th, and they didn't pick it up and deal with it until November 4th, at which time there was a lot of shit going on. Now, the Hartford Parking Authority. I received a parking ticket on Booth Bay Street in Hartford.
Oh, that's right.
From an Officer Maldonado. Mm-hmm. That I never got that ticket. I mean, I don't walk away from tickets. I'm known to fight tickets. I'll take you to fucking federal court over a ticket.
We've literally made a federal lawsuit out of a parking ticket.
Right. Now. So, they used to be down on Morgan Street, near Market, and now they're on asylum. So I called up and I said, I'm going to be coming in. I'd like to access, to inspect. And he said to me, you have to submit a request in writing or submit an email. Now, 41 years to access and inspect a public record, you have the right to present yourself at the location where the record exists and make a verbal request to the record custodian for prompt access to inspect. Now, it is, if they want a written record of the request for prompt access to inspect, they can write down, could I have your name, please? I don't have to give you my name. A male came in today and asked for prompt access to the following record. Now you've got the record you're looking for. I'll come back or I'll tell you about whatever. And then, because I memorialized this the same day, he told me, we have to do what the Corporation Counsel's Office tells us to do. Tried to change his story at there, and then I got it on tape. I don't know about the audio quality, but we've got that hearing on tape. It's going to go up. But
are you talking about the Hartford Parking Authority audio tape?
Hartford Parking Authority.
Yeah.
No, we've got the videotape that I shot. The audio may not be good, but they're going to be sending me the audio recording that we can put up on YouTube.
Well, I was there, not as your counsel, because I find at these FOI hearings, Ed does so much better on his own because he can you did great at both. I was at both hearings, Tuesday and Thursday. The questions you were asking, Mr. Boone, and getting right to the point, and I want that to go up for people to see how well you did. And I was there recording it, so if there's anything wrong with the audio,
it was a microphone setting on the camera. But
okay.
but let me.
But I want to hear that because I thought that I heard Mr. Boone at the beginning of the hearing say, we require all requests in writing because we forward them to the Office of Corporation Counsel where they track them to know what people are asking for. Now, that's not verbatim, but I really want to listen to that.
That's what he said.
Because I think that's what he said. But then as the hearing proceeded and he kind of gathered the way it was going, in other words, he gathered from the hearing officer that prompt access doesn't require a written request. By the end, he was saying something different. He was saying, well, he thought we were just talking about asking for information off a database. And of course, you can't have prompt access because you can't look at the computer because it has information protected by the Driver's Privacy Act. And people do come in and look at, other records like rules or procedures, and you don't have to put that in writing. They would just show that to you. So we kind of changed from the beginning towards the end about whether they
He was covering his ass.
Whether they actually require everything in writing. I know he said at the beginning they did. I know it. And then the hole in his argument, he was saying that because you were requesting something off the computer and the database was subject to the Privacy Act, you couldn't access the computer yourself. You had to look at something that was downloaded from the computer and redacted or whatever to exclude the private information. And so, of course, it would have to be on a piece of paper. You couldn't look at the screen. And therefore, because it was on a piece of paper, it was a copy. And so, therefore, you had to put a request for that in writing because it was a copy. And I'm thinking that logic is so circular. No, I can request prompt access and not put it in writing to look at something off the computer if I'm not going to be purchasing the copy. No, the only way you can show me what I asked for is to download it. I'll look at the copy. That doesn't mean I have to purchase the copy, though. but they were acting like anything that you get off the computer is a copy, so therefore you have to make the request in writing because you're getting a copy. No, I'm not getting a copy. You know, if I ask for the policies and procedures of the Hartford Parking Authority, they're not going to just take it off the shelf and give it to me. No, they're gonna, well, I guess they could just take it off the shelf and show it to me, right? But they're saying they can't do that with a computer. You can't just walk up to the computer and look at it. So anything they take off of it's a copy, so you have to request in writing. Is that what he was saying? I'm so confused. I know.
Okay.
I know that, but you weren't listening the way I was, and I think that's the direction it was going.
Man made me put my request in writing for prompt access to inspect public records. Plain and simple. Now, I have referenced...
But do you understand what I just said?
No, I do. I do. Because you always have to look at a copy. Because it's a copy, it has to be in writing. No, let me tell you what they do, and then I'm going to get off this because I know how important what you're going to talk about
Well,
is.
no, this is important.
The reason that people request and demand FOI requests in writing is, one, it gives them an opportunity to delay. Because you send in writing, they have 4 days, they send a boilerplate response acknowledging that they've received it, we're looking into it, and we'll get back to you once we're done reviewing the records. Okay. Now, then they'll send out a letter saying, your request is too broad, it is too large, we'd like you to narrow it and be more specific. Well, let me tell you why you can't be specific. If I walk in and tell them exactly what I'm looking for, the fucking document disappears. So you have to throw your net over a pile of records, knowing what to look at them. Then while you're looking at them, you see the one you want. See, I'll take this one. Now, the other reason is this. The Corporation Counsel's office gets a heads up about a possible issue in the community. When the Hartford Current comes in and starts asking for records from the tax collector or the tax assessor.
So they want it in writing.
So you put it in writing, and then the Corporation Counsel's office says to the tax assessor, tax collector, what's this all about? And the mayor wants to know. And then the mayor can say, what are people looking at so I can have a heads up? Well, sometimes I don't want you to have a heads up. I'm a legal investigator. I don't want you to know what I'm looking at.
And the law gives you that right.
To not explain it, I don't want you to know what I'm looking for because I don't want you to interfere with what I'm doing.
For example, look what happened when you filed a federal case. The Office of Corporation Counsel interfered with the Civilian Review Board and told them not to look at your case. So if they're interfering in that way, imagine the ways they're interfering when they get a hold of information that people are looking into other things.
And let me just say this. So on Tuesday, I'm finding out the involvement of the Corporation Counsel's office. On Thursday, I'm finding the involvement of the Corporation Counsel's office. At this Police Civilian Review Board, I'm finding out about the involvement of the Corporation Counsel's office. The city of Hartford is in trouble because of the Corporation Counsel's office. Now, Rachel, I'm not done with the city of Hartford because I still got a couple FOIs out there that I'm going to renew and I'm going to follow. But I'm going to ask Master Control to go to the left camera.
No, let's not do that. You're just making an excuse to get up.
I am making an excuse to get up.
We don't have to go to any
You're
one
going
camera
to,
or anything like that.
Then fine. You start educating the people on the other side of the camera to what you've been reading for the past 5, 6, 10 hours.
Well, I want to start out with, this was an investigation that was conducted regarding the June 4th, 2016 Flatbush Avenue incident, which was the incident where 2 individuals ran from the police, and there was an arrest that was eventually made of one of the officers involved, Sergeant Spell, that's gotten a lot of publicity and attention by the media. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Coates, the commander of the IA over at the Hartford Police Department, and Sergeant O'Brien, who assisted him and is in the unit, were conducting their investigation. Now, these are the people they interviewed. They interviewed Sergeant Stephen Neeland. I'm just going to go through these names because it shows the depth of their investigation. Lieutenant Loriano, Sergeant Morrison, Sergeant DeCenzo. They interviewed a Lieutenant Powell, Lieutenant Reynolds, Sergeant Kessler, Officer Barone, and we're going to come back to him, Detective Cruz, Detective Rea, Detective Pili, Officer Nelson, Officer Thomas, Officer Sposito, Officer Pianza, Officer Perez, Officer Rangia, Officer Marfala, got an Officer Muniz, an Officer Martinez, an Officer De Cruz, Officer Corvino, Detective Reeder. We have Sergeant Ruiz, Detective Kernoyer, Officer Hathaway, Detective Mastriani, and we're going to come back to him as well. Officer Fogg, Officer Cologne, Officer Boyka, Ramos Dunn, Officer Torres, Officer Franco, Officer Prignano, Officer Gutierrez, Officer McMahon, got Officer Cody, Officer Quaglini, Lieutenant O'Brien, Sergeant Brooks, Sergeant Michael. And those were all the people they interviewed. Now, out of all of these people that were at the scene that night, one officer, Sergeant Spell, was arrested. And there's a video that we've been showing on this show and on the morning report that showed other officers kicking the passenger of the car while he was out of the car. One officer in particular, a large officer with a sleeveless vest, we counted 4 kicks to Officer Diaz to Mr. Diaz while he was on the ground. Okay, and we wondered, on June 4th, 2017, we said, well, the 1-year period statute of limitations for misdemeanors has passed. So apparently there aren't going to be any other arrests because the one arrest was only for misdemeanors, so you can assume if there were other arrests, those would be for misdemeanors as well. So the 1-year statute of limitations had passed. Now, I'm going to get back to Officer Barone's statement because that's the one that I found most interesting, and Ed has some things to add about that because he was aware that Officer Barone was the officer who wrote the primary report for the incident. But when the state police were investigating this, they relied on a 27-page review of the use of force on Mr. Perez. And I'm gonna go into that in a minute, but this is hard to go through because I just went through this report today. It'd be easier to discuss it if you want to join us. So what was the information that you had, Ed, about Officer Barone?
Officer Barone was he caught the case. It was his job to write the report.
Yep.
It was assigned to him to write.
Now, when we deposed Officer Barone, we attempted to ask him questions about the June 4th, 2016 incident. and he was told not to discuss that incident, and by his counsel. One reason that the primary reason I wanted to ask him about that incident, and at that time I didn't have access to this report or his statement. But the reason I wanted to ask about that statement is we had noticed on the video somebody yelling camera, camera, camera.
Right.
As if they were worried about being caught on camera. And I argued that showed that there is some kind of inherent culture in the Hartford Police Department about not wanting to be video recorded. And that inherent culture is what led in September 2014 at the Park Street incident and at the Kelsey Street incident to prevent you from recording.
And I have maintained continually that the presence of a camera takes away the ability of the police officer to alter the narrative. In other words, and I know what's coming, if I kick somebody 4 times and there's no video, I can deny it. And it's my word as a police officer against an accused who's under the influence of drugs. Who's going to believe who?
And throughout this IA investigation, individuals who are on video engaged in use of force, whether it was an authorized use of force or not,
justified or not,
I'm gonna continue with this. Whether it was a justified use of force or not, they're supposed to make a report about it. And littered throughout this IA are instances where officers who engaged in force did not do the reports about it.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, if you read between the lines, and sometimes you don't even have to read between the lines, when it became evident there were videos, people were handing in their use of force supplements way after the time period that they were supposed to be doing it. And that's a really interesting thing about this report. And the interesting thing about it is these officers who did not submit use of force reports until after it became evident that they were video recorded are officers that are still out on the streets right now completing reports and making arrests. And these are officers who, when they believed they could get away with it, didn't put anything about use of force in a written format. It was only when they knew there was video that they made that required report, and that is the most disturbing part of this IA. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Matt, you can get in a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Now, there is a Supreme Court decision, Brady v. Maryland.
Yeah.
All right. And there's a possible state case, Giuliotto, or whatever the name is. Okay. Now, what the Brady decision says is, when an officer's credibility is found to be lacking, you put him on a list. And it's a list that has to be disclosed as exculpatory to any defendant that this officer has written a report about, to give the defense attorney and the accused a heads up that this person in the past has falsified or omitted factual information to alter the narrative of what happened. In my case, and I know exactly where I thought you were going, even though Flatbush Avenue happened after Park Street and after Kelsey Street, Barone's way of conducting himself as a police officer was caught. He got found out in June of 2016 that he omitted information, and I know what's coming about his dash cam. It was omitted. When by omission, you have altered the narrative. You have controlled the narrative. You have misrepresented the narrative by not putting everything into the report or acknowledging everything that happened. And I maintain that if he was doing it on June 4th, 2016, he probably was doing it on Park Street on September 12th, 2014. Because Brady is kind of create the list for all future attorneys and defendants to know about the incident. But I've got a federal lawsuit questioning his credibility from September of 2014, and you just finally got caught. In other words, man comes into my store, and I believe that he shoplifts every day he comes in, but I can't catch him. But when I finally catch him, in my head I go like this. He's been stealing out of my store for a year. He finally got caught. So what happened on June 4th, 2016, to me, is a clear indication of when you start asking him questions about what happened on the night of September 12th, 2014, and his fucking story's all over the lot, and it's not true. It's my word against his word, except for the fact that I had a camera. And the Corporation Counsel's office, and I know where they were going, tried to say, yeah, but you turned your camera on and you turned your camera off. When the camera was off, the things that he's saying happened, whatever. So,
well, Officer Barone apparently does the same thing. So,
well, well,
so,
go ahead.
So this was an interview that was conducted of Officer Barone on November 21st, 2016 about the June 4th incident. And it starts out with Officer Barone, it all started with him because he saw a car and he attempted to conduct a motor vehicle stop. And it says he didn't notify the City of Hartford Dispatch Center and did not obtain a traffic stop number for traffic stop prior to the pursuit. I guess that's wrong. You're supposed to. Do you know
Absolutely.
about that? Do you know about that? What is that?
Absolutely.
Can you explain?
Well, normally, you know, if you're going to stop a car, you call it in,
Mm-hmm.
your location and the plate number of the car and whatever, and then if something goes wrong, you can say you're in pursuit or whatever. So I guess his first radio transmission was, "I'm in pursuit of this car."
Well, let's not get to that point yet. So
Okay.
To answer your question, Rachel,
Yeah.
policy and procedure in almost every single department in this country, when a member of law enforcement wearing a badge and a gun with the powers of arrest stops an individual, whether walking down the street or driving in a car, he must notify dispatch that he is pulling over the car or stopping the individual on the sidewalk and report that for the record that this incident is occurring.
It says here he conducted a motor vehicle stop on a black Nissan Maxima. He didn't notify the City of Hartford Dispatch Center, and he did not obtain a traffic stop number for traffic stop prior to the pursuit. So why would an officer stop a car and not call it in?
I have the answer.
Yep.
I'm a police officer, and I'm going to work 8 hours in the city of Hartford. And I'm going to stop 100 cars during my 8-hour shift. And I'm not going to report 75 of the stops. I'm going to walk up, seatbelt, tail light, improper turn, going through a stop sign, going through a stoplight. And there's really nothing criminal, or there's no big shit going on. So I let the person go. But now I've got 25 stops where I walk up to the car, I call it in, and it leads to some type of an arrest, drugs in the car, or whatever. Well, when the department computerizes his activity,
Right.
they say, you know something? This guy's got a goddamn sixth sense. He pulls over 25 cars, he's got 25 pinches. This guy is really on the ball. He's not just harassing people in the neighborhood, pulling everybody over. He has a sixth sense. He should be a sergeant because of this sixth sense.
And it also helps them to avoid, because I know that there are laws in place in Connecticut that require police officers to track statistically the race of individuals that they stop. So if you're stopping a lot of people of one particular race and you don't call it in, then that does not contribute to the statistics. And you have to wonder, I mean, I did not know this. I want to go through this with a fine-tooth comb because I just learned something from you, Ed, and that makes a lot of sense. It's like
you skew the numbers.
It's like an attorney who pleads out. No, it's like a prosecutor who pleads out. Gives great offers to get rid of cases. Right and left. And only takes, the slam dunks to trial or whatever, and then says, I have a 100% win rate. Yeah. You can totally skew it, get rid of the hard cases, whatever. So thank you. And the way this started out, and you must have a sixth sense, is Officer Baird observed the operator of the black 2015 Toyota Camry, later identified as operated by Mr. Ricardo Perez, incisively, and the IA report puts incisively in quotes.
What does incisively mean?
I'll get to it, okay? He identified Ricardo Perez incisively utilizing the vehicle's horn at the intersection of Zion Street in Glendale Avenue in Hartford. He determined that Mr. Perez was in violation of Connecticut General Statutes 14-80A, excessive noise. So get this, in the city of Hartford, where they're dealing with murders and they gotta, they're setting up task force, and the Puerto Rican Day Parade was the next day, and so everybody's, on heightened watchfulness, and there's crowds out and everything. He's stopping this guy for excessive noise, for beeping his horn, and not calling it in. It's exactly what you just said. And I don't think the IA investigator knew what incisively meant either, because it's in quotes, because that appears to be the word that Baird used, that Perez was incisively utilizing the vehicle's horn. So I don't have any idea what that means.
We don't have a computer here, but, sometimes, when I went to the police academy, Breach of Peace had the phrase, in a violent and tumultuous manner. So it might be from the statute.
Yeah. It might be.
That word may come right out of the statute where Baird uses it.
Okay.
Okay, but go ahead.
So that gets to the bottom of that. Why he stopped him.
That is the reason.
Oh.
That is the reason. And now you've told me, because I hadn't even thought of that. You're right. When you pull somebody over and there's an allegation that the city of Hartford's police department is anti-Hispanic or is hassling the minorities in the north end of Hartford, the black community, the statistics aren't there to properly show how many times they get pulled over.
Right.
No, how many times have you heard a prominent black businessman say, I've been pulled over 17 times for driving while black? You're right. That does happen. But if you don't call it in and the driver doesn't make a complaint, nobody knows about it.
Okay. Do you want to? Now, I want to hear Matt's comment on this. Because Officer Barone, during his interview, had a reason why he didn't call it in. He did not notify dispatch because there was significant amount of radio traffic.
It's possible. I mean, you have to listen to the tapes, but there are times when, if it's very busy, you're not going to bother the dispatcher with a minor thing. And with any stop, a lot of times you can stop a car, you go up, what's going on here and whatever, and let them go, and you're not bothering the dispatcher with anything. Obviously, if you're going to issue them a warning, a summons, or make an arrest, you have to notify a dispatcher afterwards because they have to issue an incident number that you can tie to the case. So it's possible that that was the case there. I don't know. You'd have to listen to the radio tapes and find out if it was that busy at that time. I don't know.
I was listening to the scanner that night. That's how I ended up over on Flatbush Avenue. Mm-hmm. And you're right. The Puerto Rican Day Parade was eminent. And what happens is the Puerto Rican community takes the Puerto Rican flags, and they have these things that stick on the car, and they're waving Puerto Rican flags,
they
and
go
they're
up and down
driving around the Puerto Rican neighborhood, and they're honking their horns, and they're beeping in there. Everybody's doing it. I mean, how many cars did he pull over for honking horns?
Yeah, if everybody's doing it, why this one?
For incisively blowing their horns.
Okay, so back to the story then. It says when Barone heard the horn being used incisively, he pulled his patrol vehicle on Design Street in an attempt to get into a position to conduct a motor vehicle stop. Mr. Perez quickly accelerated and went westbound. Okay? So Officer Barone also stated that he did not obtain a traffic stop number because when the stolen vehicle drove by him, he began to focus on that vehicle.
He was distracted.
I'm not sure if that means when the vehicle accelerated or not. So that's
but the
that's
thing
a
is,
little unclear.
He wasn't aware that the vehicle was stolen at that point, right?
He couldn't have been aware.
Because he didn't call in the plate to find out.
Yeah, he couldn't have been aware.
And he didn't have time to check his mobile computer.
Right.
Apparently. Okay, all right. So he's doing all this stuff and he hasn't notified anybody, hasn't checked the plate.
Right.
Okay.
So prior to the interview, So prior to this interview on November 21st, 2016, the IA investigators had reviewed the cruiser camera footage, and it appeared to them, I guess Lieutenant Coates and Sergeant O'Brien, that at multiple times, Officer Barone's camera abruptly stopped recording.
This is during the chase?
I will answer questions as I go.
Okay.
When Officer Barone was asked why the camera was shut off during the initial traffic stop.
Oh, okay.
Well, it was never actually a traffic stop, though, was it? They accelerated. So Officer Barone didn't call it in, and the camera was shut off when he was getting ready to make the traffic stop.
I got to say something.
So he had time enough to think about turning the camera off.
I have to say something.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Most dash cam video is activated when you turn your lights and siren on to make the stop.
Oh, so it's not on all the time?
No.
Well, it is on all the time. And before, it's always recording. But when you turn your lights and siren on, it starts recording that with indication your lights and siren are on. But it has 30 seconds
30
or so
seconds
before
prior to
that. It's saved. So you can see from 30 seconds prior to the stop to the time you turn
Okay.
the lights and siren on, then it's continuously on. Otherwise, if you don't have lights and siren, it's continually looping.
Got it.
So what Matt's saying to you is this, is that the recorder is constantly recording, and it overwrites itself, keeps overwriting itself. The minute you turn the light and siren on, it goes back 30 seconds and then starts going forward. So it has the 30 seconds before the switches are on throughout it being on. Now, so that tells me that somehow, some way, he had to shut it off before he initiated the lights and siren. So he was going to pull a vehicle
wow.
over. He was going to pull a vehicle over with no lights and no siren. How do you tell somebody to pull over if you don't have a lights and siren? Keep reading.
Well, it's weird. Let me just say something. It's weird because the cameras are there for documentary evidence as to why you're stopping the car.
In
And
other
that's
words,
when you want
the
it.
horn beeping, the incisive use of the horn in violation of 14-80 subsection A,
That's a major crime.
there would have been evidence.
There would have been, you would have heard that, presumably heard that on the tape, and, you know, for officer safety and protection, everything, that's the time you want it to record. That's not the time you want to
Because
shut it off.
otherwise, it's their word against yours. Mr. Perez may have said, I wasn't beeping my horn, and Officer Barone would say, I have
Rachel.
a recording.
Rachel, let me explain something to you. A police officer in the city, any city, New Haven, Bridgeport, Hartford, New London, Boston, if he goes out and just randomly starts pulling cars over, just randomly pulls them over, he's going to find violations. I mean, I'm telling you, this is 40 years ago. If I follow you, I'll see you commit 100 violations in a 1 hour period of time. Either your tire goes over onto the white, your tire goes onto the yellow, you don't come to a complete stop, you blow a light, you're going excessive speed, your tail light's out at night, your marker light's out.
Okay,
yeah.
got it. Let's keep going. When Officer Barone was asked why the like you had said on the other one where he had that reason for not calling in the stop, maybe the radio traffic was busy. Okay. Now that doesn't get to why you would turn the camera off right before you make a stop that you're not reporting, but okay. So let's see why he turned the camera off. He stated that since he went back to patrol a few months prior, he commonly turns the camera on and off on different calls for service. Officer Barone also stated that since the policy in regards to cruiser cameras was kind of old, he was unsure as to what was relevant in the policy. Well, Officer Barone, can I tell you that the most recent policy and what it says is the most relevant?
And
that's kind of the way it works.
And
it doesn't matter if it goes back to 1850. If that's the last policy, that's the one.
And my knowledge of the deposition testimony is that he took the test for sergeant. He was on the list. He was waiting to be promoted to sergeant. Now, hold on a minute. So as a wannabe sergeant at the Hartford Police Department, you goddamn ought to be able to read the most current policy and understand it, or you bring it to a supervisor and say, look, I'm a pretty intelligent patrolman. I'm getting ready to make sergeant. This doesn't make any sense.
Maybe he's saying that the policy was so old that it existed before cameras, were installed. Then what kind of policy was it?
Yeah, they had Brownie automatics. Kodak Brownie cameras.
Okay.
Instamatics.
Yeah, Instamatics.
The camera abruptly shut off again on his approach to the conclusion of the motor vehicle pursuit on Flatbush Avenue in West Hartford.
Cameras.
Officer Barone stated that he was not too good with the cameras because he was in a conditions unit for 2 years and their cruisers are not equipped with cameras.
Conditions? What's that?
It's they patrol the streets, the conditions of the neighborhood.
Panhandling, littering.
Yeah,
quality of
noise.
life
Yeah,
stuff.
quality of
Noise.
life
So maybe
stuff.
that's why
Oh,
he's
okay.
finally attuned to too much noise from being in the conditions unit.
Right.
Okay. Officer Barone said that his adrenaline was going through the roof and he was trying to make it to the scene. Upon further inquiry, Officer Barone was asked that if these two factors were occurring, why his concern was turning off the camera instead of securing the suspects. That sounds like a question I would ask at a deposition, and counsel for the officer would object to. And I think it's nice that IA is asking the same exact obvious question.
It's very relevant.
Your
Yeah.
adrenaline's pumping, you're racing to the scene, but what do you think of? Turn off the camera. Wouldn't you want the camera on? Isn't that contrary to officer safety?
Not if you know what you're going to observe when the vehicle is stopped and the people are being taken out of a car. Not if you're an experienced patrolman and you know exactly what's going to happen with all of the officers manhandling the people in the car. You shut your camera off. And you know something? It was, I believe, other departments' cameras
It was
that
West
caught
Hartford,
this.
I
It was
think.
West Hartford.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
But there was footage from some of the cruisers for
Right.
Hartford as well. But anyway, listen to this. This is my favorite part. Officer Barone then stated it was, quote, muscle memory to turn off the camera. What does muscle memory mean to you?
It's a habit. It's a conditioned habit.
Conditioned habit.
Hold on. Muscle control. That's what he was doing in a cruiser, and he accidentally hit the off button. He was jerking around.
No, I don't think that's it at all.
This is exactly what it is. When you fire a firearm repetitively
Right.
at the range, you have muscle memory. Your arm knows where to go, and it goes back and it comes back to the same place.
You're
muscle
building,
memory.
You're building
But
neural pathways.
let me tell you something.
With practice.
This guy is stretching it. But keep going.
What do you mean stretching it? I don't understand what you mean by that.
He's coming up with every excuse in the world for shutting his camera off when it doesn't take a
But
rocket.
that's not a good excuse. That's an excuse. That's not an excuse. That's an admission.
To him, that's an excuse.
It's an admission of wrongdoing. It's an admission that I've done this on lots and lots of occasions.
Right.
I've covered up crimes
Right.
committed by Hartford police
Right.
officers that it's become such a habit that
Right.
I automatically do it without thinking.
I'm surprised he doesn't say everybody does it.
Well, muscle memory kind of means that to me as well. It's ingrained. It's something taught in the atmosphere you're in. Lieutenant Coates attempted to clarify with Officer Barone and referenced his report where Officer Barone stated that he observed Hartford police officers were actively attempting to get both occupants out of the stolen motor vehicle into custody. So Lieutenant Coates is driving at the same point we are. Why, when you see a struggle going on, is that the time you turn your camera off?
Exactly.
Yeah, because that could be used as evidence in court if you're going to use it against the two perps in a stolen car.
Not if you
And
know
assaulting
what's
the
going to
officers.
go
Right.
happen. Not if you know,
Well-
based on experience, what's going to happen at
Right.
the doors of that car by police officers taking somebody out of a car.
That's what he was after, but in the proper sense of using the camera, you would use it for evidence.
So,
But he turns it off because
Because a defense
Know it was gonna
attorney
happen.
would use it as evidence.
Lieutenant Coates then asked, in all this chaos, why would you take the time to shut your camera off before you get out of the cruiser? Officer Barone has an answer, and I don't think it's a good one. I think it's a really bad answer.
Hold on. I'm going to FOI these audio tapes because Lieutenant Coates in his deposition said in Class A IAs, they take written statements
Oh, these are all
and they
videos.
audio record all interviews. So I want to actually get the audio recording
Yeah,
of
I know.
Officer Barone's interview.
Here comes Officer Barone's comeback.
What was the question he asked again?
It's so good it bears repeating. Quote, "In all this chaos, why would you take the time to shut your camera off before you get out of the cruiser?" Can anybody think of a reason? A good one. A one that's consistent with...
I had to
Even
pee.
legitimate. Yeah.
I had to pee.
What, in front of the camera?
I had to pee.
He saw naked people running around and didn't want to embarrass them?
No, come on. What's his answer?
No, that's when you turn a camera on. Because nobody's going to believe the story later.
Officer Barone stated that he did not think it was relevant to continue to record the incident, and Officer Barone denied shutting off the cruiser camera so it would not capture the suspects being taken into custody. So Officer Barone said it wasn't relevant. And apparently Lieutenant Coates asked, well, did you shut it off so you wouldn't capture the suspects being taken into custody? And Barone denied it. So Lieutenant Coates, we're thinking on the same path here.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah. How could it not be relevant? You had a high-speed chase.
Well,
you want to document it. How's that going to not be relevant?
Not only that, but what I haven't said is during the course of this high-speed chase, Mr. Perez hit a police officer. He did. He hit.
Cruz, I think his name was.
No, Cologne, I think.
No.
Was that recorded on tape?
I don't think it was
No.
Cologne.
I don't know.
Because I heard him when an officer got hit. I heard that come over the radio that night.
Okay, well, let me find. It did. So the adrenaline was pumping, and you heard how many people were interviewed being related to the scene because an officer had been hit by a car.
Yeah.
And they didn't appreciate that.
Yeah.
So why would it not be relevant, knowing that there was an officer injury, a high-speed chase, all these officers responding to the scene? So if that's not relevant, what is relevant? If that is not relevant, and who said it's up to him to determine what's relevant?
Doesn't that go back to the policy? Whatever the policy happened to be at the time?
Yeah, so you can turn your camera off when you decide something's not relevant. I don't think it says that.
Is it completely up to their discretion?
We have to find the policy, but I have a feeling it is not.
Yeah.
It does not appear from the questioning by Lieutenant Coates and Sergeant O'Brien that it was up to his discretion.
All right.
Okay, so Officer Barone stated that when he approached the driver's side of the vehicle, he observed multiple officers, to include Detective Peli and Officer William Cote, trying to take Mr. Perez to the ground and handcuff him. This isn't stuff you'd want recorded. It's not relevant. You know. Officer Barone struck Mr. Perez in the right side of his body with his fist because his right arm was tucked underneath his body near his waistband area. Again, not relevant. Use of force, you definitely don't, justified or not, you don't want that recorded.
But rather than say, gun, 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 they go, camera, camera, camera.
I want to know, and I don't think this report addresses it, who said that? Who said that?
Yeah, it would be interesting to see who said that.
I want to know who said that. So, Officer Barone stated he was focused on the suspect and could not specifically describe which officers used what type of force. He also stated he was not directly involved in the pursuit of the stolen vehicle. He didn't observe any officer on scene use force which he would deem excessive.
Can I ask a question? I mean, it is what it is. I mean,
We're almost done. Yeah.
The report is what it is. So let me get this straight. You made the initial attempt to stop the car, off the record, off camera. The vehicle took off, and you gave pursuit, but you weren't actively involved in a pursuit?
Why would he say that?
When did he break off his involvement in the suit?
Well, when did he get to the scene? Was he the last one on scene? And if so,
He
who
probably
was
turned
pursuing?
left when the other guy turned right. 'Cause
Okay, so Perez accelerated onto Brookfield Street before Officer Barone lost sight of the motor vehicle. Officer Barone then observed the vehicle again as it was traveling on Dart Street. He used his mobile data terminal and determined the vehicle was reported stolen out of New Britain. He began to follow the vehicle as he awaited the arrival of a secondary unit to assist in conducting a felony motor vehicle stop. Mr. Perez traveled east on Dart Street, west on New Britain Avenue, north on Chandler, east on Flatbush, north on Westbrook, east on Bonner, north on Saybrook, and then north on Brookfield. During this time of travel, he was operating the vehicle normal until he accelerated north on Brookfield Street, causing Officer Barone to once again lose sight of the motor vehicle. Okay, so we're going to have to go over this again because I'm confused. I thought that he positioned himself to stop the motor vehicle.
Yeah, and then he lost sight of him. But then he reacquired the vehicle.
So a short time later, we're skipping ahead here. He lost sight of it, but a short time later, Detective Peli and a couple others observed Mr. Perez operating the stolen vehicle. So they followed him, and then there was the stop. We don't have time to go into that, but we will at some point.
Go back to the good stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So I was looking for the place in here because I'd seen it previously. There was an Officer Boyka, and I don't know if you remember this, but Officer Boyka's cruiser came in contact, I believe, with Mr. Perez's car 3 times. And Barone, and I don't want to get this wrong, but I don't have time to look through it. And Barone said something to Boyka. Boyka said, I ran into the car. And Officer Barone said something like, well, you can say that it backed into you. Something like that. Almost like
cover your ass.
Almost like cover your ass and say that the car rammed into you, not that you rammed into it.
The question...
Because Boyka says on one occasion he purposely ran into the car. Purposely ran into it.
I'm looking at the clock. I just want to say something.
I know.
Brady needs to be in place in the state of Connecticut through the Chief State's Attorney's Office, Department of Criminal Justice. Brady needs to be in place. That name, Stephen Barone, should be Brady'd and should be available to every accused.
Okay, let me get through the last part of this so we can take this call. Okay, so then they spoke with Officer Barone about his conversation with Officer Boyka using the iCall system. Please note the iCall system allows officers to speak to each other one-on-one while not utilizing the main patrol channels. Officer Barone stated that he is aware radio transmissions to include iCalls can be obtained by the public. When Officer Barone was asked if a member of the public heard that portion of the radio transmission, could it reflect poorly on the police department, Officer Barone responded, in retrospect, probably, and stated he was only joking with Officer Boyka and was not attempting to have Officer Boyka change his report.
Bullshit.
And so Barone said something to Boyka, and I got to find it, and I will. We're going to go over this piece by piece in the coming weeks. Said something to Boyka about, well, didn't he run into you, or didn't he back into you? And I know what you mean. And Barone's saying he was joking around. So let me get this straight. An officer is hit by a car. There's a high-speed chase. Barone is so flustered that his adrenaline's pumping and everything else. And, people are kicking and trying to put into custody violent, felony criminals that they just chased. And this is the time when Barone chooses to joke around with Officer Boyka about what he should say. He's joking around at that point in time. An officer's down and being taken to the hospital, but Barone's going to joke around in a radio transmission.
Brady.
It doesn't make sense. And I don't know, they have a part in here where Barone tried to get a warrant to search the car, and he took it over to the state's attorney's office on June 14th. and he spoke to an inspector, but then the state's attorney, Gail Hardy, intersected, quote, Officer Barone. She spoke with him. She went into her office, reviewed the warrant, said she'd contact the officers, and at that point of the interview, she never got in contact with the officers. So I don't know. I feel like there's something missing here, there's something going on there that I'm not quite sure about, something missing there. Let's take our phone call.
Are you there?
Oh, did I hang up?
Yep. Call back.
Okay. So this is just chalk. Oh, there we go.
Summary judgment.
Who's calling?
Hey, yeah, it's Paulie again.
So you had
Yep.
time to catch up?
Huh?
Did you have time to catch up?
Yeah, I did, man. What an awesome show. You guys are the best, man.
Well, thanks. And
You, Matt, and Ed are awesome.
well, good, because
Thank you.
because I know, Paul, that you know Hartford and you know the streets of Hartford, and you have a lot of information and a lot of insight into these issues. So we appreciate that coming from you, especially.
That's right.
Well, I love you guys too, man, because you're awesome. You tell the truth. Some people don't want to hear it. You know, I made some comments earlier on Facebook, and
Okay.
Facebook marked it off as spam. You know, what the hell's that about? You know.
I don't know.
Anyways, but it's great. You know.
Paul, let me
You guys
say
have the best show
s-
in the world. I love this show. It's reality. It's real things that people need to hear every single day.
I need to say something, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Everybody at this desk on this side of the camera supports law enforcement.
Yes, sir. I do too, sir.
We
Always
just-
and forever.
We just don't support bad law enforcement.
That's right.
That's right, and I know all about it because I grew up in Hartford and Rocky Hill and Weathersfield, and I've seen the bad law enforcement. And we have to correct everybody, and that's why there's Ed Peruta, Rachel, and Matt Tyszkka.
Well, you make it all worth it, Paul. I have one thing I'm going to wind the show up with, so let's go and let me wind it up, okay?
God bless you all, and you guys do a great job. And thank you, and have a nice weekend.
You too.
Okay?
Bye.
You stay
Thanks,
safe, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I happen to be, speaking of Facebook, I happen to be looking at Facebook, and I don't know how this popped up, but it is a video of a Hartford police. It was posted on July 11th, and I've asked the person who posted it for permission to replay it on our show, and he hasn't gotten back to me because I just asked him. But it's a video of two Hartford police officers. I don't know, does it look like the south end to you, Ed? Maybe it's the north end.
North end.
It was the north end. Two Hartford police officers. When the video starts, gentleman, a black male, has his hands behind his back, and he's on the car. You know, nothing amiss going on that you can see. It looks like a normal arrest, but there's a crowd around, and they're very vocal. You know, very vocal about, you know, this is bullshit and this is that. And it from the video, it looks like the police officers are just making a normal custodial arrest, and that all these neighborhood people are harassing the police and making their jobs difficult and doing exactly what police officers say they have to contend with all the time. And this is going to dovetail back to what we were talking about. And a lot of people are weighing in saying, see, look at these city people, you know, using worse terms than that. Look at these city
Using the
people,
N-word.
you know, making it hell for these officers and this and that. And the person who posted the vehicle came back with a very strong response, saying, you know what, you need to come up here and you need to see police act, because you don't see the way the police were acting before the video started. When the cameras came out, they cleaned it up. But before those cameras were out, I guess they had the guy on the ground, according to this guy, and were doing things that seemed excessive to the crowd. And that's why the crowd, according to this man, was fired up. In other words, it's like if you come over and provoke somebody and do whatever, and then they respond, and when they're responding, you turn the video on, people look at it and go, wow, that guy's an asshole. Look at what he's doing to you. But they didn't see what you did before the video
Rachel,
came on.
Man standing on a street corner, masturbating in public, sees a cruiser coming, puts it in and zips it up and stands there as you go by because he's being observed. Police officers, and this is why I said Barone shuts his camera off because he knows from his experience what's going to be going on as he pulls up. I'm shutting it off. Yeah. Now, I saw that video. I hope they give us permission to play it. But I would ask him, give me the whole clip. Or I guess there wasn't a clip before the cameras came out.
That's what he says. That's what
it
he
is
says.
true. It is true.
Yeah.
That does happen.
But
and I'm gonna say something. I understand adrenaline. I can understand a police officer going out of bounds. I can understand a police officer getting over the guardrail or into the weeds emotionally when he's involved in something. But the one thing they don't know how to do is admit it, acknowledge it, and learn from it.
Well, and look at the qualified immunity that applies to police officers. The law recognizes that if police officers mess up and the law wasn't clearly established, then they get a break. You know, they get a break.
Qualified immunity leads to summary judgment.
Somebody needs to analyze whether police officers, when they're so pumped up on adrenaline and another officer's been hurt, or their circumstances, whether their use of force needs to be measured differently. Does a police officer have the right to beat the shit out of somebody because he's pissed off that you just did something to my partner? Okay? And if we as a society agree that police officers have that right, then so be it. Then, Officer Barone, it's completely acceptable, you know, what you're saying. Don't turn off the cameras, though, and this is my point. If we're going to allow police officers to do it, then we need to legalize it. We don't need to be acting like it's illegal, but let them do it because we all know their adrenaline's pumped up. We need to be transparent about what we will put up with and what we won't put up with, and that's the true lie here, because people make excuses for it, and maybe the excuse is valid, but right now there's not a law on the books that allows police officers to beat up people because they're pissed off that those people injured a fellow officer. That law is not on the books.
I need to ask.
Maybe they should go to their legislators and get it on the books, but right now it's not on the books.
I need to ask Matt a question. Matt, you were in law enforcement for how many years?
25.
25. Did you ever get into a high adrenaline firefight, shoot your weapon, get shot at, somebody charging you with a knife situation?
No firearm stuff.
Since you've been out, and I know that you get involved in a lot of different things, have you been anywhere near a firefight?
Couple times.
Okay.
Not directly involved.
I will tell everybody here, I know what it's like to be hyped up on adrenaline and watch the people around you getting hurt, or people doing things around you, and your nostrils flare out, the adrenaline's going, and you don't give three shits about what the law says, the Geneva Convention says, or anybody says. The people on the other side of the road, the people on the inside of the tree line, they ain't going to be nobody when I come out the other side. So I do understand what police officers go through. And I do sympathize with them. But you're right. If we're going to acknowledge that this problem exists, don't shut the camera off. Let's analyze it and learn from it and see what we can do about it. But we're out of time.
Okay, so thank you, Matt.
Next
Ed.
week,
you,
Monday
guys.
morning. Thank you very much.
This show
We're out of here.
tired me
Have a good
out.
week. See you next week.